Yeah, so what I'm going to talk today is about this kind of broad vision and these broad resources that we have kind of with Merlin and eBird. I'm going to start talking about eBird and some of the tools and data that it provides, and then Cullen will follow up talking about Merlin, sound recording, sound identification, and associated tools. I often really like to start broad and really thinking about what has brought all of us here together today. And to me, that is this magic of birds. There's just something about birds that brings people together across languages, across cultures, across interests that connects people with one another. And with these projects that we're talking about today, what we're trying to do is create a platform that people who are passionate about birds and conservation can use to work together to create a global set of information that can be used for conservation impact. And to me, a great example of what's possible through the power of birds is with events like Global Big Day. And so this is just kind of a snapshot. One day last year, the second Saturday in May, more than 100,000 people went out around the world in a single day and reported more than 500,000 different records of birds from more than 200 countries in one 24-hour period. Every dot here is where someone went out, collected a piece of data, a checklist of birds, where they were on that day. And that information both is really useful for research and conservation, and also is, to me, just so inspiring that so many people can be brought together through the power of birds. And with eBird, our goal isn't to do this on just one day, but to do this on every day, everywhere in the world, for all time. And so to date in eBird, there's almost 2 billion observations of birds that have been shared by more than 1 million people from every single country on Earth. And to me, this is, again, just the power of birds. It is so exciting to think about what we can do when we all work together. And so the points of light here on the map are everywhere someone has reported birds to eBird. The brighter the spot, the more checklist. This isn't a map of the world at night. There's no kind of underlying map here. It's just where people have shared their bird sightings. And one of the things that you might notice as well is that in the African context in eBird, there's a fair amount of data from East Africa and Southern Africa, some from West Africa, but Central Africa and much of kind of the Sahel, there isn't a lot. There's a lot of opportunity. And so this is one of the things, any ideas you have today or ever in ways we could work together and support your work, collaborate to have more information available. That's what we're really excited to do. One thing that's really important to note is that all these data we're looking at here and everything we'll talk about today is completely free. This is created by the community, and we believe that it's important to have that be free for the community. This is all from people like us going out looking at birds. And that, again, to me is the core of this, that it's not just birds, but it's this intersection of people and birds that can create this really powerful impact. That when folks come together, regardless of their interest, regardless of where they are in the world or in life, the power of birds can connect folks. So we do that by working with people to support individuals and communities, and also through partnership. And so we work with hundreds of partners around the world. And like I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Cullen and I were in South Africa, where we'd been generously invited by Nandi Tobela, who's on the call, and others at BirdLife South Africa to participate in community guide training, where we worked with the incredible community guides program there to talk about ways that these tools could support their guiding efforts. And we do this all around the world. Cullen was in Uganda, where he'd been invited by Uganda Bird Guides Club in December to do similar trainings. And we're really excited to and feel very honored to be able to work with the groups here, and are also always open to working with new groups anywhere, if that's ever of interest to anyone. What I'm going to talk about is kind of the framework in which we think about the tools that we try to build for different communities, many of which I think are represented on the call today. And so what we're really trying to do is build technology. That's kind of where our expertise is, creating app software that can create an activated public that can engage big numbers of people in nature through birds, use that activated public's interest to power actionable science, information we can use to create data products that then can be used to drive conservation impact. And I'm going to talk about each of these kind of 4 steps. This is the framework that we think about for how we work. So I'm going to talk first about kind of the technology and the activated public piece. Really, what we try to do is build free tools for all communities engaging with birds. The biggest one, the most kind of widely used tool is Merlin, which Cullen will talk about after me. But what I'm going to focus on is eBird. So eBird is the data reporting tool. That's the way to log the birds that you have encountered by sight or by sound in a way that you can keep track of your own sightings and that they can also be available to others, whether they're other birders, other researchers, other conservationists. And one of the key ways to make sure this is accessible to everyone is making sure that we're working to develop tools that can reach anyone where they are in their journey with birds. And so in talking with Ellie before this presentation, you know, the question of can we make more of eBird or Merlin available in Amharic? And that is absolutely something that we can do. And so to date in eBird, we support more than 100 different versions of bird names. And this is this species here. And my guess would be just across this call, we have many different names that we use to refer to just this bird. And this is such an important part of having the names that someone knows to be able to refer to something in a shared way. So you can use those data then and know you're talking about the same organism. And so eBird and Merlin are available in about 40 languages for everything in the apps, and bird names are available again in about 100 languages. But we can work to translate into any language that folks are interested in. And so this kind of network of bird observations is really, again, coming from people, and it's kind of this power of people coming together. One of the things that's been really exciting is we've been working in the last couple of years to connect eBird data in Africa with the African Bird Atlas Project. And so ABAP kind of started this conversation at the Pan-African Ornithological Congress a couple of years ago. And recently, this kind of data pipeline was created where folks who are doing eBird checklists in a region, if they're doing those within a pentad, within the kind of 5-day trip card protocol of the Bird Atlas Project, those data will be converted and included in Nigerian Bird Atlas Project, Kenya Bird Map, and systems like that. So that's been this really exciting kind of step forward to hopefully having more data available. It's increased the amount of data in the African Bird Atlas Project by about 20%. And so we're really excited to continue to work with ABAP and other groups to hopefully have more data available for decision making in Africa. One thing that I've talked about a little bit, and I just want to make sure to talk about, is the kind of unit of data that we're collecting in eBird. Because whether you're using this as a bird watcher or as a researcher, I think it's useful to know the kind of unit of information that we're looking at. eBird collects data in checklists. And so this checklist was actually done right by the Vogelwarte in Switzerland this last year. And the unit of information that we're collecting is a checklist. And that is, you were at a location on a date and you saw some birds. And this core unit is really usable in so many different forms of research. If you're a birder, you want to go find something. But the piece that has really made eBird data valuable for so many different users has been these pieces on the left side of the screen here, the additional information that we collect. One of this is effort. How long were you out birding for, and how far did you travel? If you travel 100 meters versus 10 kilometers, you're going to detect a very different number of birds. If you're out for 10 minutes or 10 hours, you're also going to detect a very different number of birds. So this effort information, distance and duration, will be automatically calculated by the app if you're using that. And that is so valuable for researchers to be able to standardize across the many different surveys that people are doing at different times of day and different places for different durations. So this has been really valuable. The other piece that's been really useful, and it's a bit, at least for me, I still have trouble kind of explaining it really well, but I do think that it's super important, is the concept of the complete checklist. And so this is really the cornerstone of how eBird data have been used in so many places. If you go out birding, there's kind of two ways you can use data. One is an incidental type list, where say you went out and you went to the local lake or pond or river, and there was an African fish eagle that flew down the river. That's awesome. That's like one of my favorite birds. It's so cool. So you saw that. You could report that you just saw an African fish eagle. But did you report that African fish eagle because it's the most common bird at the location and you always see it when you're there? Is it because it's really rare and you only report the rarest birds? This complete list concept tries to get around that. What it's asking you is, are you reporting all the birds that you saw when you went out birding? Are you including the Egyptian geese that were standing on the riverbank underneath the eagle flying over? Are you including the gray-headed sparrows? Whatever the birds are that might be more common at that place. If you include everything and say, yes, I'm including a complete checklist of all the birds I was able to identify, you are then getting an incredibly valuable piece of data, because you're saying that for this date and this location, I went out birding here. I found 38 species of birds. This was the count. And every other species of bird in the world I did not find at that place on that date. You're getting both presence information and the ability to infer absence. And that allows you to understand changes throughout the year, changes over time, and is much more robust. And so that's why I like to talk about this, because I think it really is a very important piece of kind of the core of eBird's data value. The other thing that we collect is counts of birds, which can be used for abundance to understand changes in numbers over time. So that's an eBird checklist. Happy to do questions about that at the end if there's any other pieces. What we do is we take these lists and again, provide all of these data for free. So if you go into eBird, you can explore data for any place and any species, anywhere, anytime. So I'll look at kind of a couple different results, or outputs rather, that can be useful. For example, if you want to know what's going on in Uganda recently, you can go into eBird and search Uganda, and you can see a variety of different things. You can understand all time how many species have been seen, how many people have contributed to eBird from there. You can see partners working in the region. You can see Judith's recent note about eBird Uganda that just launched last month. You can see birds that have been found recently in the area, what's going on this month. 735 species this month. These are the newest species reported in the region. You can see recent photos. You can see where folks have been going birding recently. And the other thing that's really exciting to note that I'll come back to is these trip reports. But so if you have all these photos right here and I go, oh, cool, lizard buzzard. I really want to know more about lizard buzzard here. I can also go in and look at everything about lizard buzzard. I can get free identification text, photos, sounds, a map of everywhere people have reported that, the kind of photos or whatever that might be of the species, and see the total amount of times people have ever reported the species. Kind of interesting. So you can understand everything at a species level as well as for any place in the world. This trip reports piece is also really exciting in the context of tools for guides. And I think at least some folks here, that the names that I recognize, work with guides or guide communities, with avid tourism being such a huge part of conservation in so many places. And we've explicitly tried to make tools that can help support guides in their both guiding efforts and their kind of advertising in many ways. So for every region, if you go here to Uganda, you can see these kind of trip reports that are a unit you can make in eBird. I can see, oh, okay, there's a birding by bus tour going on right now that Eliana is leading. Oh, wow, here's a recent trip report from Crammy, and wow, 560 species. I want to learn more about that. I can click on that and get to this kind of list that has the full map of everywhere you've gone, all the species, and this is essentially a free tool that guides around the world can use to create a product for clients as well as kind of free advertising. And so if you go to, this other tour that's going on right now, these links, these trip reports will update in real time while you're birding. So you can share this link out and say, follow along as we tour in Uganda or Kenya or Nigeria, whatever it might be. Um, in Kenya recently, you can see the freelance tour guide, James, was using this to help summarize the waterbird census. And I saw in Martha's note in chat that she's going out to participate in the waterbird census right now. So this can kind of help to connect people and share these stories of your birds with people around the world. We also have the ability to have eBird profiles as both a tool for an individual, but also for a guide, where you can see here, James has used this as a way to put his contact information up and have folks know that this is a way they can reach out if they're interested in connecting. And then you can see right next to that the fact that he's birded comprehensively in Kenya and that this, could be a good fit for whatever guiding might exist. This is something we often want to point out. And working with Nandi in South Africa was really exciting to see the community guides program there. They've been creating trip reports and checklists just in the last couple of weeks, and we're really excited to see what that can do to help drive more guests for them, hopefully. So that's kind of activating the public, providing tools for people that are birders, that are guides, that are approaching birding from whatever way they are. Once folks have contributed their sightings, shared their checklists, then we want to try to take those and turn those into scientific products that can be used to drive research and conservation. We do that in the lab with our own kind of research team with one specific project. But again, all these data are publicly available, and more than 1,000 papers have been published with eBird data to date, and hundreds more are every year. So all these data are fully available for you at any time. What we do with the raw data is transform it into some data products that we also make freely available. We call these status and trends. Status is on the left, range and relative abundance for all species that are covered by this, and then population trends, which is, I think, self-explanatory. We have several hundred species covered for at least part of their range in Africa for the range and relative abundance. And for population trends, we currently only have enough data in South Africa to create any population trends. Within a few years, that might be possible also in East Africa with the way the data trends are going for Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. But there's a big opportunity there to have more data to fill in these gaps. What we're taking with these, and I'm not going to dive into the modeling or the analytical process too much, but we're trying to create a modeled product that is estimating truth based on a combination of the birds you observed on your checklists, more than 110 ecological variables that are all remote sensed data from satellites, habitat land cover, habitat fragmentation, topography, elevation, rainfall, everything along those lines. Then combined with weather, we have weather data, and if it's raining and blowing 50 kilometers an hour, you're going to detect birds very differently than if it's sunny and calm. Variation between people and variation between effort. Again, to 100 meters versus 10 kilometers, there's going to be a big difference there. So we take 1.9 billion records, put it in with all these different pieces, and we create these models. And so here for Alpine Swift, what we're looking at is the relative abundance as predicted by eBird data. The darker the color, the higher the predicted number abundance at that location. Red is breeding season, blue is non-breeding, yellow is migration, and purple is year-round. You'll notice here there's two grays in the background. There's a pale gray. This is where there's enough data to make a prediction, and the prediction is 0. This dark gray is where in eBird there isn't enough available data to make a prediction. And so we run into this a lot for these models for West Africa, most notably, largely because we don't have any kind of existing partnerships there or significant kind of folks contributing data to eBird. So these maps to me are just amazing. There's so much information available in this. This is kind of this picture of this species. We're able to understand where they breed, where they migrate. Excitingly, again, this is based on abundance information. So what this is actually doing is standardizing all these different ways that people have gone birding, if whether it was in your back garden or at the national park, whatever that might be. And this is predicting the actual number of individuals of alpine swift that you would encounter if you walked for 2 kilometers for 1 hour at the optimal time of day to encounter that species. So, you know, for many songbirds, that's going to be around dawn. For vultures, that's going to be late morning, midday. Nightjars, it might be near sunset. There's going to be different times of day, but it's a standard metric now. So any way you go eBirding, your data can be used to create this expectation. So now this is comparable across locations and across species. So this abundance metric can be really useful for conservationists if they want to understand, okay, which area has the highest percentage of population of alpine swift in a region. You can actually do that in these tools. You can draw areas and understand what percentage of the population is contained within that. So if you're doing conservation planning, these resources can be used for that. In addition to just the year-round kind of understanding of a species, you can look at it throughout the entire year. Again, thanks to the power of birds and the fact that across the world, folks are connected by this shared passion. And so here for black or yellow-billed kite, you can see kind of the full annual cycle, migrating north and then coming back south, resident populations in India, and just seeing kind of this incredible global picture of a species. And at least to me, this is like, it feels like the pulse of our planet. I've spent more time watching these than I should admit to almost anyone probably. But it's always just an amazing thing to see. And so for Africa, again, there are many species that are covered by this, but there's also some big gaps. You can see here this pattern that I've mentioned a couple times, where there's data in Southern Africa, usually going right up across Botswana and Zimbabwe, a little bit into Zambia, and then this gap across northern Zambia and southern Tanzania until we get kind of into Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, northern Tanzania. So many species have this same kind of data availability challenge. But some are able to be modeled more widely. And so woodland kingfisher with such a fascinating intra-African migration, you can see them going up to the Sahel and then coming south to their I guess second summer in southern Africa, and just seeing that cycle again is really exciting. You can see, you know, this is jumping around. There's some weeks where it can only predict for a small area due to the data availability. This dark gray is where there isn't enough data for that week. But you can see the kind of promise and the potential of understanding this. And again, all these data are available, all these maps. You can use them for whatever you want, whether it's outreach, engagement, or research. In addition, population trends. We have these produced primarily for North America and some for Australia, but there are also some that we've run for South Africa based on some data availability. Everyone's heard, I love hadida personally. I think they are such delightful birds. That might be a polarizing topic for some who get woken up early in the morning. But I think they're wonderful. But here, according to eBird data, from 2016 to 2022, you can see kind of an interesting pattern being kind of modeled here for population trends. Blue is increase. Red is decrease. The size of the circle is the abundance. The larger the circle, the greater the number at that location. The smaller the circle, the smaller the number. You can see here an interesting pattern over this kind of 7-year period, that there's a strong, consistent increase of hadida kind of shown by eBird data inland, and then also a pretty consistent decrease along the coast in Western Cape and Eastern Cape. So it's kind of interesting to see this. These models don't say why this is happening, they just say what the data show. And so in many places, this has triggered kind of conservation conversations about what might be happening, what could the drivers of this be. And to me, this also illustrates the fact that many population trends, across the range, it's showing about a 17%, predicting a 17% increase. But when you look across the range, it's actually much more complicated than that. It's not just they're going up everywhere. There's some up, there's some down. What is that? Other species have different patterns. The southern fiscal, common shrike, is shown by eBird data, suggested that it's declining about 12% over that same 7-year period, pretty much across the entirety of its range. We're really excited to see more of these results in coming years, hopefully more across Africa. And we also always very much welcome species suggestions. If you work on a species or a set of species for which these data products would be really useful, please let us know. We choose which species we're trying to model based on partner feedback because our goal is to drive conservation impact. And if you're working on Abyssinian ground hornbill, and it's really, really useful for you to understand anything that we could support on, we would love to collaborate to try to do that with you. So again, this ties into our goal at the end of the day is conservation impact. And I'm just going to kind of finish up with a couple examples of the way that these kinds of data have been used for conservation impact. Not a comprehensive list, but a few different examples in different kind of scenarios. One is kind of a federal example, governmental use case. In the United States, there's several kind of bird protection laws. One of those is specifically around eagles. So the bald and golden eagle. And this is a law that is often very applicable to renewable energy siting. So when folks are trying to put up renewable energy wind farms, presence of eagles is a big obstacle to that. What we did was worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to create a kind of modeled surface here that is the prediction from eBird data of where eagles occur throughout the year. And we then took that and created an inversion of that layer for where eagles are not. And that is then now being used by the federal government as the low risk collision areas. So these are areas where eagles are not. What this has done is helped, one, speed up the permitting process in areas where eagles are not. So there's more renewable energy available, helping to reduce reliance on non-renewable energy sources. And secondly, created a much more robust kind of understanding of where eagles are, where previously it was at the level of entire states. So there was very coarse understanding and there wasn't as much protection for the birds in this process. So it's both helped birds and helped people, and we think helped kind of more renewable energy happen. So there have been several things along these lines. This has been one that's been exciting. A similar piece, but for industry, has been over the last several years, we've been working with Nespresso on some of their coffee production farms in Costa Rica specifically, where they're really trying to maximize the ecological benefit of their farms, both from a kind of environmental stewardship side of things, as well as a way to have them be worth more. Higher ecological certification, you can charge more. The way that they're understanding the ecological health of a farm is by looking at eBird data and birds in those parcels. So what we did was create a map of all of the parcels of land that they're using, and then modeled all the birds in Costa Rica based on eBird data, and looked for each of those farms based on those models. The models showed what birds should be there, and then people did eBird sighting, eBird checklists at the parcels and saw what birds were actually there. The ratio between those is the ecological completeness, and that is what has been used as this kind of metric of ecological certification. And so it's had a direct economic impact. kind of across their certification process. And we're really excited about that. And kind of the last thing I'll talk about is just a kind of NGO example. In India, we've been working, collaborating with Bird Count India for over a decade. And their incredible work to engage a national community in birds has led to the production of the State of India's Birds, which they're on version 2 now. And this is built on citizen science data, on eBird data from folks like all of us. And it's the first ever national assessment of India's birds made possible through the contributions of passionate individuals like everyone on this call and so many folks around the world. So to me, it's just really exciting to see what we can all do when we kind of come together and work towards this kind of impact. And I'm just really excited to see what continued potential to work together is. And thanks everyone for your time. I'm going to hand it over to Cullen now for kind of a Merlin side of things, but then really excited for any questions or additional pieces that folks have. And thanks for all the work that you do with birds and conservation and people around the world.
All right. So, thanks, Ian. Ian really talked about eBird, the eBird platform and our observational data pipeline. I'm going to talk a little bit about Merlin as a tool that's really based on eBird, but also about the media side, in particular sound recording, and why we're so interested in really expanding sound recording right now. Let me just make sure that I am sharing with sound. There we go. All right. Um, so as Ian pointed out, eBird is a global platform where people have uploaded 1.9 billion observations. In addition, with each checklist that Ian talked about, you have the option to upload photos and sounds. And as a result, we also have this archive of over 70 million photos and 2.6 million sounds. And this archive is available online. All of you can go and search it. You can explore all of the photos and sounds online and use them for your own projects. The goal of this is to support research and conservation efforts. For example, a lot of people use this when evaluating the taxonomy of different populations. Bird sound has been a really valuable tool to complement genetic work and understanding the relationship between different populations, and particularly the extent of these different populations. For example, with the split of the red-fronted tinkerbird. In addition, others have been using this collection to try and inform the status of species. A number of different conservation groups have been using the Macaulay Library in complement with others to identify species that don't have documentation in the last 10 years. This Lost Birds project, you can go on and explore what are the species in Africa that nobody has actually documented with a photo or sound in the last 10 years. There's 22 species. And hopefully we can make sure that we're paying attention to these species. For example, the yellow-crested helmet shrike hadn't been seen in 16 years. And on 19 December 2023, it was refound in part because of the exposure of the status of the species through the Lost Birds Project. And you can go and explore the most recent photos and sounds of this in that checklist, or by looking through the Explore media. But I want to talk about how we're using the entire collection to power Merlin and potentially other tools. Uh, 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 um, and when you look at Merlin, it really does leverage that entire 1.9 billion observations and all of those photos and sounds. It uses all those observations to identify lists of likely species for your given location. But we're also using that entire photo and sound collection. So if you haven't used Merlin, it's a free bird guide. This is a view of Merlin in Zulu because it was translated thanks to BirdLife South Africa and Nandi, who's here with us today. But all of the photos and sounds that you see in Merlin were uploaded by citizen scientists using eBird. In addition, so one way we use the photos and sounds is in these species accounts. But the other way we use it is to train automatic identification. For example, we have a photo ID tool where if you take a photo, you can upload that photo to Merlin, and it will suggest identifications based on that photo. And to do that, we used machine learning to create a classification model that really uses all of the entire collection as a training data set to help Merlin identify these species. And over time, as more people add more photos for each species, that only helps update and improve that model. Well, now we're working on doing the same thing with sound. And really is a similar pipeline where we're taking sound and basically creating images, the spectrogram, and using machine learning to create classification models. And so we basically cut it up into 3-second pictures. And with each picture, we are identifying patterns to suggest species. And so in this case, it's like the model has identified a western meadowlark and a common yellowthroat, and also another call of the western meadowlark. The result is a very powerful tool, especially for new birders who are starting bird identification, because one of the most challenging things is when you go into a forest and you hear a bunch of sound and you can't even see the birds, and you start trying to identify those birds. And so now you can literally go into the forest, and let me know if you can't hear this.
Yes, we can hear.
And as birds sing, Merlin can suggest those the species that it's hearing. And the goal here is to help people answer this basic question of what is that bird that I hear singing, so that they can learn more about that bird. We found this to be a very powerful tool that has reached a much larger audience than we have through eBird. And as an example, when we launched Sound ID in Europe, we saw a dramatic increase in the use of Merlin, where before we had about 100,000 monthly users in Europe. That shot up to last June almost over 1.8 million people using Merlin, and that was really driven by Sound ID. And so we've been really curious, is like, who are these people using it? Because we're reaching a much larger audience than we ever had before with eBird. And so one of the things that we did is we looked online, both in North America and in Europe, trying to figure out, like, who are these people that are using Sound ID? And so here is just a montage of of people talking about Sound ID.
So I'm gonna show you how to bird like a pro. And all you need is one app. That app is called Merlin.
It's called Merlin Bird ID.
The Merlin Bird ID app.
Merlin Bird ID.
Merlin.
Where you just open this app and you hit Sound ID. You download like whatever region you live in, and then it'll identify all the birds around you and light up when they sing.
Look it. That was just all in like 5 minutes of me sitting out in my back deck.
This app is now part of my personality. I just left a work meeting, heard birds chirping, hopped in the whip, pulled the app out. House finch.
I'm obsessed. I'm never going to stop using this app. Like, I can't even handle it.
So I'm addicted to this, not in a literal medical sense, but I don't think I could live without it.
I'm addicted to this, so addicted. I'm addicted to this.
My dad sent me this the sound app for birds. And you press play and it listens to the birds around you and it tells you what bird it is and what the bird looks like. So now my ass over here, since I've been using it, thinks I'm like a bird expert.
Okay, so yes, I heard of the Merlin app before. I use it all the time in my backyard. Lots of birds we have caught on it. We got a yellow-throated warbler, I think it was called. We get blue jays, cardinals, white-throated sparrows all the time. And yeah, it's an awesome app.
Hear the birds chirping. What kind of bird is that? My boo identifies it because she got the Merlin app. Is that a black and white warbler? Nah. Think again, the cinnamon colored feathers. It's a Carolina wren.
I just brought it down here and given it a go, and it's identified widgeon and red shank and black-headed gull and a great tit. And it's absolutely brilliant. It seems to work really, really well.
So we don't know any of those. We don't know any of those people. These were just random things from social media. But I think that what we see is that we're reaching a lot more people, and not all those people are going to be using eBird or collecting data for citizen science, but they are people that can support conservation in different ways. And so one of the exciting things is like, how can we connect this larger community to conservation efforts? But currently, Sound ID is really only really working fully in North America and Europe. We're working on expanding it in Central and South America. So we're working with a coalition of partners to expand it across Latin America and also in India. And we would love to do that in Africa. But the challenge is that we really want to have over 100 recordings or 150 recordings for each species. But in most countries in Africa, we're at more around 15 to 20% of species where we have enough data. And once we have data, just to point out, one of the things that we do is we actually work with local experts to go through and identify the target species and also the background species, and that really helps improve performance in the Sound ID model. So currently, Sound ID is a tool that you can use in Africa, but it only covers, maybe 18% of species, depending on the area that you're in. But it's still a tool that you can use to actually record and visualize the sound recordings. And you can add these sound recordings to your eBird checklist, and that will help us train Merlin to identify birds and expand the model. The other side to it is that, looking at ABAP and the eBird data that we've had, even combining the data, you're going to see that we have some major data gaps across Africa. This is true for other regions of the world as well. And one of the big questions is what is the possibility of putting out microphones and using that to supplement observational data? One of the big challenges with that is being able to differentiate whether you're detecting one individual or 1,000 individuals. And that's really important if we're trying to understand changes in abundance over space and time. And so, but there is this really kind of exciting question about how can we complement bioacoustics data with observational data to better understand bird populations. Regardless, however this works out, we know that we need more sound recordings for Africa to really power these tools, which is why we've been working with groups here. Here's some photos from a workshop we did with Uganda Bird Guides Club in Uganda in December. Here in the middle is Joseph from Rwanda, who's been working with Planet Birdsong. And here's a workshop from BirdLife in collaboration with BirdLife South Africa this last month. We're really excited to work with anybody interested in sound recording to expand sound recording and support the sound recording community in Africa. And so if you're interested in that, we'd love to hear from you. Lastly, I just want to mention is that we do have an in-depth kind of online training course, how to record bird sounds. And if anybody's interested in that, I can give you a code. It normally costs $100, But for anybody that's interested, with this code, Africa Sound, you can access that for free. So that's it. Here are our emails. If anybody would like to get in touch with us, we'd love to hear from you with any questions, or certainly if you are interested in collaborating, please do get in touch.
Thank you very much. Wow, wow, wow. That was awesome. Yeah, it's really both of the applications are interlinked and outstanding for us also working on the research activities on the field. They're helping us a lot. I've been also using it in different parts of Ethiopia, especially Merlin, and I have moderate experience. Yeah, now was the time for a very brief French translation, and we are going to get back to the question and answer comment part. Gabriel, if you are here.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I will try to be brief, but not easy because I took a lot of notes. Donc je vais faire la traduction en français. Je vais essayer d'être assez bref pour respecter le temps, mais j'ai pris beaucoup de notes, alors on verra si j'arrive. Donc, on avait aujourd'hui la chance d'avoir Ian Davies et Cullen Hanks de eBird aux États-Unis. Et ils ont présenté deux applications qu'ils développent, enfin que leur département à Cornell développe, eBird et Merlin. Je suis sûr que la plupart des gens avaient déjà utilisé ou en tout cas entendu parler de ces applications. Ils ont voulu du coup présenter comment on pouvait utiliser ces applications et un peu leur puissance, comment on peut exploiter ces données pour la recherche et la conservation et la sensibilisation du grand public. Donc Ian a commencé par montrer une carte très impressionnante où on voyait l'utilisation d'eBird et on pouvait voir que juste en une journée, durant le Global Big Day, il y avait des observations, il y avait des millions d'observations collectées par des milliers d'ornithologues à travers le monde dans 200 pays. Et ça, c'était juste en 24 heures. Et jusqu'à ce jour, maintenant, il y a presque 2 milliards d'observations qui ont été entrées sur eBird. Et toutes ces observations, elles sont gratuites et en libre accès sur leur site à travers l'application. Ils ont aussi rapidement présenté que leur travail, surtout le travail de Ian, je pense, c'était de collaborer avec différents partenaires dans le monde pour présenter comment eBird marche, faire un peu du training, de l'entraînement, et qu'il était à l'écoute si quelqu'un était intéressé à le contacter pour démarrer une nouvelle collaboration et en connaître plus sur l'utilisation de ces applications. Donc après, il a un peu présenté, Ian, la technologie, donc comment entrer les données sur le portail qui est eBird, qu'on peut accéder, qu'on peut utiliser dans 40 langues différentes. Et en ce qui concerne les espèces d'oiseaux, elles existent en 100 langues différentes et ils sont toujours en train d'augmenter le nombre de langues dans lesquelles on peut utiliser l'application ou différentes traductions de tous les noms d'espèces, aussi des noms locaux. Et il a aussi montré que jusqu'à maintenant, pour le projet, pour EBAP, pour African Bird Atlas Project, contre la classe des oiseaux africains, on utilisait surtout d'autres technologies. Mais depuis récemment, il y a un échange des données qui se fait entre les différentes applications du projet Atlas et eBird. Et depuis qu'ils ont appliqué cet échange des données, il y a déjà 20% de données en plus sur le projet Atlas des oiseaux d'Afrique grâce à la contribution des données eBird. Après, il a parlé, Ian, de ce qui était l'unité d'observation de eBird, quelque chose qui est très important parce qu'on fait des observations sur le terrain avec son téléphone dans l'application et on utilise des checklists, donc des listes d'espèces. On va rentrer quelques métadonnées comme la date, le lieu, etc. Et après, il y a deux types de listes d'espèces qui existent. Il y a une liste plus opportuniste, on entre simplement les oiseaux qu'on a envie d'entrer, ou ce qui est plus important, c'est les listes d'espèces dites complètes, où on note vraiment toutes les espèces qu'on a vues, avec aussi l'effort d'un échantillonnage, donc la distance parcourue, la durée d'observation, le nombre d'observateurs. Et ces checklists complètes sont très importantes parce qu'elles donnent aussi des informations sur les espèces qui étaient absentes. Et c'est ces checklists complètes qui vont être utiles pour faire des modèles qui vont être exploités pour la science et la conservation. Il a aussi vite présenté, il a juste pris le cas de présenter le portail eBird pour l'Ouganda, par exemple, faire des recherches spécifiques par lieu précis ou par pays. Donc là, il a entré Ouganda et on voyait qu'il y avait rapidement une synthèse des données eBird pour le pays. On pouvait avoir accès aux observations, aux photos, aux espèces. On pouvait voir les descriptions des photos, des localisations par espèce. Aussi des rapports de voyage. Il y a quelque chose qui est très utile pour les guides. On peut même avoir un profil de guide et on voit nos rapports de voyage, même en temps réel, les lieux où on est allé, quelle espèce on a vu. Donc ça peut être très bien pour les guides, les freelancers, pour les gens qui ont envie de faire de l'écotourisme. Ensuite, il a présenté l'impact que eBird pouvait avoir pour la science et la conservation. Donc avec cette immense quantité de données récoltées à travers eBird, ils peuvent calculer le statut et l'évolution des populations des oiseaux grâce à des modèles qui sont du coup construits et entraînés à partir des observations collectées sur eBird. Tous ces statuts et ces évaluations de population, des effectifs, ils sont régulièrement mis à jour et ils sont gratuits. Et il y a tellement de données qu'on peut même modéliser les mouvements migratoires des espèces. On voit ces cartes très impressionnantes, on voit comme des flux, comme des flux migratoires d'espèces. Donc on voit vraiment comment elles bougent en Afrique ou à travers le monde en fonction de leur cycle de vie. Par contre, on voyait aussi sur les cartes que souvent, les modèles ne pouvaient pas calculer de prédictions pour l'Afrique de l'Ouest et l'Afrique centrale, car il n'y a pas assez de données collectées dans ces régions-là pour entraîner les modèles utilisés par eBird. Après, il a fait des exemples plus concrets de conservation. Par exemple, il a parlé des aigles et des infrastructures éoliennes aux États-Unis. C'était un peu comme on a vu il y a quelques semaines une présentation au Kenya, où c'est qu'il a modélisé, grâce aux données eBird, pu modéliser la répartition des aigles et faire des cartes de risques pour limiter les risques de collision entre les rapaces et les éoliennes. Au Kenya, on a vu la même chose avec les rapaces et les lignes électriques, par exemple. Aussi, pour la production durable de café au Costa Rica, où eBird est utilisé pour la certification du café, quelque chose qui pourrait être intéressant, j'imagine, pour d'autres types de cultures. Il a aussi parlé de l'Inde, qui, grâce à eBird, a pu produire un document qui est l'état de l'avifaune indienne, qui est la première étude au niveau national sur les oiseaux en Inde. Alors ça, c'était pour la partie de Ian sur eBird. Maintenant, rapidement, deuxième partie de Cullen sur Merlin. Donc, il a dit qu'avec eBird, c'était évidemment 2 milliards de données d'observations récoltées, mais il y a aussi énormément des millions de photos et d'enregistrements qui sont collectés, qui sont mis dans des collections. Et grâce à ces collections, il a été possible de créer une deuxième application où c'est qu'on peut identifier. L'application Merlin, en fait, elle fonctionne un peu comme un guide d'identification gratuit sur son téléphone qu'on peut avoir partout, à tout moment dans sa poche et utiliser. Et il est possible, les cartes de distribution, les photos et tout ça, c'est grâce aux données qui sont récoltées sur eBird. Et il y a tellement de données qu'il était possible d'entraîner l'intelligence artificielle pour reconnaître en premier temps les photos, donc une reconnaissance visuelle sur les photos. Et ensuite, il y a aussi l'intelligence artificielle pour reconnaître les vocalisations des oiseaux. Et ça le fait en temps réel. Je ne sais pas si vous avez déjà essayé. Du coup, on peut utiliser son téléphone, ça va enregistrer le son ambiant et identifier les oiseaux qui chantent en temps réel. Et du moment où ils ont lancé cette application, enfin cette fonctionnalité dans Merlin, ça a connu un immense succès auprès du public, pas juste des ornithologues professionnels ou expérimentés, mais n'importe quel grand public. Ils ont montré un petit montage de vidéos collectées sur TikTok. On voit des utilisateurs moins habituels que des ornithologues qu'on connaît, qui parlent de leur expérience incroyable en utilisant Merlin et la reconnaissance des chants d'oiseaux. Donc, même si finalement, ces personnes ne vont pas collecter des données sur eBird, elles ne vont pas collecter des données pour les atlas, etc., l'impact auprès du grand public que des applications comme Merlin a eu et peut toujours avoir est tellement grand qu'il y a vraiment moyen de collecter une immense quantité de données à travers le monde. Et il a fini un peu en disant qu'ils aimeraient beaucoup aussi inclure l'Afrique dans ces grands projets où c'est que plein de gens vont dehors et enregistrent les chants d'oiseaux pour collecter plus de données, mais qu'il manque encore des enregistrements de beaucoup d'espèces d'oiseaux en Afrique pour entraîner les modèles et pour que l'intelligence artificielle puisse fonctionner pour ces espèces. Donc, c'est très important de collecter des données acoustiques en Afrique et ils sont très intéressés à collaborer avec vous pour ces projets. Tout à la fin, il a parlé d'un code, code Africa Sound, I wrote for free. Donc, un code gratuit pour utiliser un produit, mais je n'ai pas bien compris ce que c'était. Alors, si quelqu'un est intéressé ou si c'est important, je leur laisserai réexpliquer parce que je ne suis pas vraiment sûr de ce que c'est.